So we'll look through this because, the homework you've been doing, you like do for like maybe a day or 3 days or a week, and then you start over. But that's not like how it's going to be. There's going to be projects that you're going to have that you're going to kind of slowly add to and build on. And, the starter project is kind of one of those first ones that, this is something you might use for the rest of the course. And you might add, a feature here and there as you go, as the course progresses. So let's go ahead and look at it. So I'm also going to make sure I'm not, because I want to add some stuff to the README. So I'm not going to be adding it to my Cat Tinder final, because that's a different app. I want to do it on my starter project. So this is the one we're going to be looking at. And actually, I'm also just going to run this one. So I actually know it's the one I'm running. Mental gymnastics, keeping track of all these projects and which one's running, which one's not. So I'm in my starter directory. I need the client. I'm going to start this yarn start. Okay. So now I know when I make changes, I should be seeing when I make changes to my starter project, I should see it. And I'm just going to get rid, I'm just going to close out of my Cat Tinder. So there's no confusion. Because that can be they can look similar. So you can end up editing one project and have another one running. And then you're like, wait, why am I not seeing the changes? Because you're actually editing the wrong file or the wrong project. So that can be just a safe way to prevent stuff like that from happening. Make sure you know which one you're running. Maybe you only have one project in VS Code open up at the same time, or only one at a time, and then not. So let's kind of go review, and this is going to be more of a review of Auth, but let's review what's going on here. And let's start with the front end. And this is something, like I said, in your starter project, you could maybe add a little maybe like features section or explanation, like how this works type stuff. And the READMEs are a good, one of the reasons that the READMEs can be good is because the READMEs are going to be specific to the project. So it's kind of a nice way to organize the documentation, because this README is going to be about the documentation for the starter project. Okay. So first of all, we're using token-based auth. Where, when we log in, this is like a really oversimplified version of this, but we can think of this like when we log in, the server will check our creds, and if valid, give us back a token. Okay. It's kind of like part one of this. Part two would be like when we make subsequent requests, So I'm saying like is when something's making a request, who's always going to be making the request? If this is like client and server, who makes the request?
Client.
Yeah, the client. So maybe I should say like, instead of we, I should say client. And give us back a token. I could say via a response. It's like the request response cycle. The client makes a request, the server responds with a response. So when client makes subsequent requests, needs to send a token. So when we make these requests, we're going to need to send the token. If token is invalid, server will respond probably with a 40, like for this one, it'll be 401 error. Probably like an auth. You might get like you might get 404s, but generally you'll probably see this 401 error. Okay, so how do we do this, or how do we handle getting token and, should say receiving token and, sending token? How do we do this on the back end? Well, the device token auth, kind of does this for us, sends this. It's kind of sending this response. Does anyone know how we do this in the front end? We talked about it, but we talked about a lot of things. So I think maybe you could have got a little lost. Does anyone remember, how do we handle, what are we using to handle like getting the token and sending it for our API calls? No, and so this is, and this error I see, this was, Steve, this is the error you have. You didn't set this part up. So you don't have that piece that's handling the token stuff. So this is the device Axios.
Yeah, I saw that and I added it. It's still, there's still something else that I'm missing though.
Cool. That's definitely was part of yours. So this is really handling that device Axios library. That's going to be in index.js. So what does that look like? So in our index.js, we do this call. We import this init middleware from device Axios, and then we call this function. So let's put that in here.
And that init does what again? It's how you receive the token and send it back.
So, I mean, we can actually go look at this. It's not that big of a, like, it's just pretty much just a file. You can kind of come in here and see what it's doing. But essentially, what it's doing is it's getting the token and some other headers from our response from the server. It's going to store them to local storage. And then it's also going to set it up so when we do a Axios call, it's going to set them up to be sent with our Axios calls. So yeah, this is going to get token from API calls and send them to be set on the next API call. Also stores info to local storage. Because one thing that actually happens with every API call we do, and this is, we could change this, but by default, device token auth is actually going to send us back a brand new token with every time we do a different API call. It's going to like switch it up. So it's never going to be the same. Like if I do like a get cats, it's going to work and then it's going to give me back a new token. So this init middleware, this device Axios is going to keep track of that. It's going to like get that new token. It's going to put it to local storage and it's going to be set to send that to the next API call. So maybe we don't need to know, I mean, so much of these details. You could really go in and like, this is a way you can kind of learn some of this more in depth, is you go through someone's code and you try to figure out what they're doing. Like this is a, you know, just 85 lines of code. You could go through and maybe not understand all of it, but this might help, you know, see what it's doing. But this is definitely part of, this is a like crucial part of this because it is keeping track of these tokens from the response and the request. Cool. All right. So that, like, you know, that's kind of like one of the first things we do. And then another thing we're doing, and I'm going to skip over the browser router. Let's just look at the Auth Provider. So this could be like another thing, like another feature of this starter project is this Auth Provider. So the Auth Provider wraps our app, and like you could throw this in the README. Like this could be like tokens. Then we could do like our Auth Provider. You know, just kind of trying to maybe put some of these bigger pieces, or just try to, you know, throw some of these sections into like, trying to explain what's going on. So what does our Auth Provider do at a high level?
Is it regarding the login?
I mean, yeah, it does login stuff, but
Isn't it a way to consume the data and a way to provide it? I remember saying that.
yeah, it gives us. So it really, yeah, it gives us a way to, you know, share like this auth state and, you know, methods like login methods.
That's where we control like the user state, right?
What?
That's where we can control the user state, right?
Yeah, the auth / you know, user state. Yeah, we could call, I think user state might be, you know, where the user state, where like the user is really like a logged in user, like a, you know, where user is a auth logged in. And it gives us like the methods to log in, log out, and register. And yeah, I could go look at my auth provider. And, you know, at a high level, see that. So there's my user state. Remember, and here's a comment like a null user is a not auth user, like i.e. not logged in. You know, if I have a user in state, like if I have an, let me just ask you this, if just for my application, would that be a lot, like would I be logged in?
Yeah.
You're talking about how you have it right now in the use state. Would you be logged in?
Yeah,
Yes, because it's not null.
yeah, because that's like not null, exactly. So this is why like, but that would probably be bad because I'm expecting a user to have like ID, email, and that stuff. So this would probably be like a bug because this would be treated as a logged in user, but it's like, well, where's the ID? Where's the name? So this is why I want this to be null at the start. Like it's not logged in. So then, yeah, I have these functions like handle register and handle login that, you know, either register a user or try to log in a user. And if it's successful, we set the user to res.data.data. You know, where res.data.data is the user. There is also a token being sent back here that, you know, device Axios is keeping track of. So when we successfully register a user behind the scenes, I should say this like behind the scenes, you know, there is also a token being sent back here.
And then that catch at the bottom is if something goes wrong, it's going to give you back the error saying that it wasn't able to register.
Yeah.
Similar to like how Axios call would have felt.
Yeah, and this is going to be something like we actually probably want to like make this work better than just an alert because there's going to be a lot of things that can not make this work. Like you don't have a valid email. It's not unique. You don't have a password long enough. They didn't send any, you know, there's a lot of things that, you know, could make this fail. Like we cannot register a user without a valid email or a valid password. So we'd want to like let the user know, hey, like the email was already taken, so we can't register you. Please enter a new email. Does this Axios call need, so from the client's perspective, does the client need to send a token to this Axios call?
Yes. No.
No token needed. Well, yeah, and think about it just kind of logically, like why would I need to send a token to register a user? Because like this is me like the first time coming to an app, I would not be expected to have a token. Or it could be sent, but it's like no token. I'm going to say not sent, but needed.
The token wouldn't come into place until after you register and then you're going for the login.
Let me add, do I need a token here?
Yes.
No, I do not need a token. Why don't I need a token if I'm signing in?
You still wouldn't have it, right? You get the token after you signed in.
Yeah, it's like, you can think about like, if I give the server my email and password, like, okay, this person's legit. Now I can give them back a token. Because I might not, this could be the case where either I have an invalid, like if I'm logging in, it means like I probably don't have a valid token. So yeah, no token needed. What about if I'm signing out? Do I need a token?
Yeah, you probably do, right?
Yes. Token needed. Because the token is what is going to be used to find, the user. So for the sign out, I do need the token. And then I'll give them, I'm like, here's the user, then like, I'll get that back. When I get this response back, will the server give me back a token?
No.
No token given back. That would be like, I'm signing out, like this signing out is kind of saying, hey, like destroy the token, like invalidate the token. It's kind of weird. It's like, I'm giving you the token and I'm going to say, hey, like invalidate this token. So now it's like, that's how you're going to be signed out.
So where the token is mostly used is like on those protected routes, anything in between the sign in and log out, right?
Yeah. And we're going to see like when we kind of showed this, like that before action authenticate user. So we're going to have like a lot of like potentially a lot of our CRUD actions could be protected. Or like on our back end, we could do API calls that are not necessarily, they may or may not be protected on our front end, but they're going to be auth on the back end. But you are going to like, so kind of like they're two separate things, like the protected route on your front end and the authenticated action on the back end. They're kind of two separate ways of like security. And you're going to want to have like both of them. The front end is going to give you that like a better UI of like not letting your user go to like, a page that they shouldn't be able to see because they're not like logged in. But then you're also going to want to protect it on the back end because, no one should be able to get data from something they're not auth to. Does that make sense? It's kind of like when we do the forms, it's like you do like front end validation on a form, and that's going to be nice to the user. It's like, okay, it's like kind of like a UX thing. It's like, don't let the user like enter in like an email that's not an email. You don't even need to check that against like a database. You could just say like, hey, that's not a valid email. But then you're still going to want the validation on the back end to like go check to see that's actually a legit email and that it's like not in your database. Cool. Maybe I'm getting a little ahead or like a little too in depth. So questions on like, this is high level. There's the auth provider. It really just gives us this way to share this user state, where user is the auth user. It gives us these methods, log in, log out, and register. And in combination with devise Axios, it's like, this is where we're kind of like, we're maintaining some of this token state. All right. So that's our auth provider. Let's go look at like app.js, see what's going on in here. So let's maybe take like this. Actually, I'm just kind of going to simplify this. So there's a couple things in our app.js. There's this concept of this fetch user component. And also this section right here, like this protected route section. So let's just kind of break this up to, let's actually say like 3 parts here. It's going to be our fetch user. Without looking at the code, like what is the point of this fetch user?
It's just to keep the user logged in, like for refreshing and stuff, right?
That's part of it. The fetch user really checks.
Is it to see if the token is valid?
Yeah, it's really to see like if there is a valid user. If there is a valid user. And it's kind of, how should I say this? It's checking to see if there's a valid user and prevents routes from, getting rendered until the check is done. So the fetch user is going to like, if the fetch user is in progress, let's just say it like this, if fetch user is in progress of checking, it looks like this. App would look like this. It just doesn't render that because it returns null, right? When it's done, then it looks like this, where it actually renders the routes. It doesn't even care if we have a user or not. It's just checking to see if that user is valid or not. So if I go to my fetch user, so when this component mounts, we check the user. Do I have a user in my state? Or do I not have a token in local storage? This is a weird case because it's saying like either I do have someone who's authed, I know for sure, or I know for sure I don't have someone who's not authed. I've checked my user. I don't care if they're authed or not. I just want to check. So here I would know that I either have or don't have a user. So I set loaded to true. And this loaded to true, this is what's, saying, hey, do I render the routes or do I just render null? While I'm checking, I just render null. That's what I'm doing here. While the fetch user is in progress of checking, it's not going to render anything. So like the user, like the front end user couldn't go to any of these paths because they're not rendering them. But once that set loaded is set to true, then it does go ahead and renders them. because it's just rendering props.children, or just returns the, hey, return the things that were within you. Okay. So if we get past this, now notice there's a return. So if we hit this, we stop. But if we get past this, so either we don't have a user or we do have a token, well, we need to try one more thing. We need to check to see if that token that we have in local storage is valid. So we're going to do an Axios call to validate the token. So is a token set with this API call? Pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
Yes, token sent. Pretty silly to have this, like, this is the one where we're going to send the token, you know, because this is what we need to validate. Validate, if I can spell validate. So here in the catch state, in the catch section, you know, token was not valid. Here, if we do get it back, like if this does succeed, token was valid, res.data is the user data. So let's set the user to that. Either way, once we check the token, we can say, hey, we've checked the token, it's either valid or invalid, don't really care, but the loaded part is true. I mean, maybe I should call this set checked. That might make a little more sense. I don't know, let's try it out, check. Loaded, if I switch that to check, replace some of these. Oh, that's all. If we don't have a user or we don't have the token, you know, we've checked the user. Boom, we can now render. Is that a more descriptive variable name than
Yeah,
loaded?
to me, yeah.
So that's what the fetch user is doing. All right, so let's go back to the app.js. Let's go back to the README. Okay, so there's a couple other parts here. There's this unprotected section. Unprotected routes. You know, these are just going to be routes. You don't need to be logged in. Let's see. Simple enough, right? You know, we might like, obviously, like that'd be really problematic if you have to be logged in to see the logged in page. Like, there's going to be routes or path, you know, route on our front end or pages that we want to be able to see whether or not you're logged in. Now those might change. Like there's not like a generic formula for like which Should the home page be protected or not? It's like, I don't, depends on your app. But we're going to want this idea of unprotected routes. And likewise, we're going to have protected routes. And we do this with the protected route component. Just going to copy this. So how is this working? Well, we have this protected route component. And this is so much cleaner than what it used to be. But we can just kind of take this little thing and throw it in our README. This component used to be so much more complicated with React Router 5. This one's pretty straightforward, I think. You know, get user from provider. You know, do we have auth.user? You know, if we have auth.user, render the route. Not, we can, you know, do something else. In this case, we redirect to login screen. And yeah, just with how React Router 6 works, so any of the paths we throw in here or any of the routes we throw in here, like, you know, user will be logged in. User needs to be logged in. Cool. So that really is like, as far as the front end, I mean, there's stuff with our nav bar that's really more just UI. You know, we kind of just need to manage like what links we show with like some if else statements. But really the meat and bones of like authentication on the front end is going to be like it starts with our index.js, where we kind of set up our middleware to handle the token stuff. We have our auth provider that, you know, has this function that really has this user state where, like, you know, a defined user means we're logged in. That's also why when we log out, we set the user to null. But this just handles all of that, like logging in, logging out functionality and register. Then we can pass that all down to our provider. So now we have user, the way to set the user, the way to register, log in, log out. You know, so for example, in like our login form, we can use that auth from our auth context and our provider, call that handle login function. Then we have our fetch user. So if we look at the app.js, there's a lot going on in the app.js now, where we have this fetch user that, and this is really going to happen on like that first, like, you can really think of this when our app first mounts. So this is like when you hit refresh or when you first load the page, like the fetch user like runs. So we check to see if we have a user. While we're checking, we don't render any of these routes. We just say, hey, let's wait to see whether or not this user is valid. Then once we decide whether the user is valid, then we can say, okay, now you can render those routes. Doesn't really matter if we have a user or not, we just know whether or not it's valid. And then in here, we can have like this protected routes section where it's like, you can try to go to these paths, but if you're not logged in, it's going to kick you to the login screen. And that is that. Questions on any of that?
Did you say fetch user checks but doesn't care? Like, so it doesn't do anything if there's not a user? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's just trying to grab the user. But if there's no use, like, because what if like, yeah, it's like it's been a year since I logged in, or there's no, or like I've logged out. Let's say I've like logged out. Like the fit, and I log out of the website, and let's just do this so we can see it. So I go to my website and I'm logged out, right? Now, when I hit refresh, the fetch user is being called, right? I could come in here and go to my console.log. It's probably getting called right here. Let's throw in a debugger. So I am logged out. I'm going to open up my inspector. Let's refresh. Oh, did that delete my token? Okay, let's log in. Go to my home. I'm going to refresh. Okay. Why is my user null right here? I'm logged in, right? What did refreshing do?
It reset your user, but it still is able to get the token from your local storage, right?
Yeah, and my user is null, because when I refresh, it's like essentially just like it's going to like rerun this whole project in a sense. My user is null because I'm going to, in my index.js, like this is all going to be like remounted, my auth provider. Well, my auth provider state by default is null. So like by refreshing, I'm running this line of code right here. And so I'm setting my user state to null. But yeah, if I go look at local storage, I have a token in here. Now, there's no way to know whether or not this token's valid other than to go check it against the backend. So that's what that's what we're going to do next in my fetch user, is we're going to go check it. Cool. It was valid. How do I know it's valid? Because there's my user. But now I'm going to log out. So I'm logged out. Let's just do local storage. Oh, local storage has been cleared. So I no longer have a token. So that device Axios is probably clearing, like when I didn't know I was doing this, but that device Axios is probably when we log out, it's also removing everything from local storage. Which makes sense. It's like, shouldn't keep that stuff in local storage if it's invalid anyway. So now in local storage, I don't have a token. So right here, when I hit refresh again, do I have a user? Well, no, because I logged out. But I'm also going to check this other thing. Do I have a access token? No, I don't have an access token. Okay, we can set check to true and we can return. We don't need to try to validate the token because we don't even have one. So if I hit refresh now, I'm not getting in that debugger. Maybe I should just do, you know, checking token in local storage. Here I could say no user. Oh wait, I could say user. You know, or no token. User found or no token. Well, I'm not logged in, so it's probably no token. Sweet. But if I log in and now I hit refresh, well, now I'm going to get rid of this debugger. Now I'm going to check the token in local storage. So that's what's going on there. So I'm going to add this and push this up. So hopefully that was like, there's a lot going on here. So I'm glad we're taking like an extra day to kind of just go through it. I think a lot of people, you know, they use it and they really have no idea what's going on. So if you can understand just like part of this, I think you're doing good. So I'm just gonna say like sweet. Okay, so let's go get some stuff set up on the back end, because now I feel like to demo the back end, we actually want to create some data. It's kind of hard to do the back end with just as it is, because really right now, if we look at the back end, and I guess we could add this documentation just really quickly, like there's really not much going on. I mean, there's a lot going on, but it's kind of all done for us. So one of the big things that we do is, or that we see, you know, as far as the back end is concerned, that we have, let's maybe switch this to like back end, is the routes. This was like given to us, this mount device token auth for users at API auth. This is generating all of those like routes, and actually all of the controller actions are also done. So now we have all the routes defined and controller actions set up for us. Pretty nice. What was like the one command we had to run? Like we essentially, you know, add device token auth gem file. This is essentially what we did. And then we did the two, like, I'm gonna need to like actually Google this, this specific command. I don't really remember it. We ran that one command to generate our model, our devise model, that user model. I'm just gonna look this up so I get it right. Now this command like does a lot for us. It adds the routes, all the controller stuff. It creates our model. In this case, the user model. Like, right, that's essentially all we did on the back end. We had to, there were some extra steps of like, add, what do we do in our models? We added this to our model, add, extend devise, user, the RB file, and then we like added, this migration. But that's like essentially all we did. It's like add the device token off to gem file. Okay, run this command, right? Add this line to the user all RB file, add this migration, and then we're like kind of set. Okay. But there's more on the back end. So what I want to do is I now want to go to to show this, I want to go to the cat Tinder part, because what we're going to look at next is there's kind of two main features on back end. There is the before action, of authenticate user bang and current user. These are like the two main things I want to take a look at, but it's going to be easier to do this with our Rails app. And I just want to like spell this right, because that's not spelled right. So this is really what this is going to be, a way to protect routes on the back end. and this is going to be the way to get user, like I'm going to call it logged in user on the back end. The back end part of this is a lot easier than the front end. You really just kind of need to know this, like, okay, I need to do this before action of authenticating user. And if then that's successful, bam, I have current user. But let's see what that means. Let me just add this one more time. So this is up on master, on the starter. So yeah, this is stuff today you can go through and like add your own documentation, but it's kind of, maybe showing some of these like basic, like the basic features of what's going on here in the starter project. And in particular, I'd say this is a lot more with what we reviewed was the authentication stuff. Okay. So I'm going to close out of this starter project because I'm no longer going to be working on it. I want to go to my cat Tinder app. So I need to find that. So be very careful as you're working with these projects that you're not, that you're working with the right one. And you've probably already ran into this, right? You've like changing one project, but you think it's another, and then you don't see like the changes show up and you're like, what's going on? You can definitely run into this now. Okay. So I'm just gonna, because we did this on Friday, but this was kind of hustling through this. So we're just gonna redo this. So I'm gonna throw these commands out in Slack. So we're gonna create a new model called cat. And this is that's the name of the model. It's gonna have a name, attribute, breed, registry, and avatar. This next command, we're going to add like cats to user. So when we created the user model, we kind of got all this default stuff that Devise token auth wanted us to have in a user, but we can add extra stuff to it. And one way we could do that is via a migration. So this is going to add the like cats column to my user table, which I already have the user table, but I want to add a column to it. Okay, so I've created a new model and a new migration. Both of those need Rails DB migrate to be run for those to take effect. So there we create the cats table, and then we also add this like cats to user, which adds this column. And I did this specific enough, this Rails G migration, add like cats to user, that it actually knew how to write the migration file. See, add column to the users table, like cats text. And then we're also going to create a cats controller. Oh, did I not delete that? Oh, I never deleted that. I guess because when I ran it for my starter project has this, so that's fine. We can delete it. I think I forgot to namespace it when I deleted it. Okay, so let's delete it. I'm going to recreate it just so we can start from scratch with that. So now my cats controller just has that inside of it. Cool. So this might be something just to kind of show you. It's like, oh man, there's something wrong with my starter project. So what I could do, I need to go change my starter project. I don't want that inside of there. I don't want that cat's controller inside of there. I can open that up in code. Or I could do that. I could do the Rails D. I need to do API. Sorry, Rails D controller. API / cats. So I fixed that on my starter project where now I don't have the cats controller. Cool. I didn't even need to open that up in code. But now I should look at it, controller, API. Cool, no cats controller. Sweet, let's keep going. Once again, a lot of this stuff I'm just going to slack out. We're just kind of going to get set up and then take a little breather. Let's go to my routes. Go ahead and add that. We're just creating some routes for like an index method and update on our cats. And then let's also add to user.rb. Add this. So I select this out. Let's go ahead and throw this in here. And actually, I want to rename this. This is really unliked cats. I'm changing the name to this in Slack. This does not give us a random cat. This is all right. I'm going to gloss over this command right now because tomorrow when we get into SQL, we'll start seeing some more things, but let's talk about this serialize again. Does anyone remember what's going on here? We barely talked about it, but what's kind of the high level idea? Like, what is this all about?
Oh, is this where it kind of like,
Converting it to a string, right? Converting
Yeah.
an array to a string.
like the JSON?
Yeah. We can't store arrays in a database, but we want to treat it like an array in our app. So that's what we're doing. Like, so notice we are in the user model. If I look at my schema, my user has a liked cats column that is a text. So this is my database. You know, in DB. Right, we have like cats is text. Because we can't store arrays in databases. We store them as text, but we can store text. But what we want to do, but we want to treat it like an array in our app. So this is the solution. So now I'm going to be able to say, for instance, in my seeds file, and I'm going to slack out a seeds file. So I don't have to type it all. So here's my user class. So what I can do is I can treat this liked cats as an array. And then behind the scenes, when it saves to the database, it will take this array, convert it to a text, and save that. And then when I pull it back from the database, it will take that text and convert it to an array. So when I'm coding, I can treat this like an array. So to show you, so I just changed my maybe I'll slack out this whole thing, this whole seeds file. So I'm just going to do it Rails DB. Let's do a DB reset. So see it like cats, I can do user.first.liked, or let's do okay, yeah, user.first.liked cats class. That isn't an array. Even though if I were to go look at how it's stored in the database, it'd be stored as text, but I can use it. It is now, when I'm using it in Rails, it's a array. So that's what that's about. Let's see how much further. No. Okay. Let's stop here. Let's take a break. Let's come back. I'm going to push this up to GitHub. And then yeah, we'll come through and we'll do some more back end stuff, and we'll kind of combine this with the front end whole picture authentication. Sweet, cool. So let's come back. Let's just call it 12 o'clock. Does anyone have any questions or need any help with anything? Steve, you said your still wasn't working.
Nope, it is now, actually. I must not have saved a file or something, but it's going good now.
You might have had to with that init middleware. You probably had to restart your React server.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I did that too. But anyway, yeah, it's working.
Okay, cool.